Well, hello and welcome to CDO Magazine's interview series. My name is Clyde Gillard from HPE. I'm the AI go-to-market leader for North America. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with Arvind Balasundaram, Executive Director, Commercial Insights and Analytics at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. And first of all, I'd love it if you told me about your role, Arvind. You have a long and distinguished career in the pharmaceutical industry. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your role. Just a brief introduction.
Sure, Clyde. I just first want to thank you for the opportunity to have a conversation with you. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I absolutely do want to thank CDO Magazine. I'm a consumer of CDO news nuggets and articles, so it's an honor to be doing this interview with you. So absolutely. So let me get right to the point. What I do is I lead the commercial insights and analytics center of excellence teams at Regeneron. And what that means really is, our discipline in insights analytics is transforming right in front of our eyes, right? It used to be kind of a very conventional, traditional. You did, your market research on the one hand, you did some data analytics on the other. A lot of that is changing because technology is changing. And I know we're going to touch on that in the course of the next 45 minutes. But my remit has really been to oversee how to mature our data platforms, get us AI ready, so we can get into more agile analytic implementation and get deeper into some of our insights. So that's kind of what I do at Regeneron on the commercial side.
Well, I have to tell you, your title certainly is interesting, right? I mean, Executive Director of Commercial Insights and Analytics. I think that really just drives right to the whole idea of what AI is trying to get at, right? Insights and industries can't really afford to not leverage AI within their business. But it all starts with data. And you mentioned that earlier, getting ready for AI. So AI is data hungry. You mentioned data as part of your conversation. And without good data, AI doesn't work, right? So while some industries can afford a limited degree of inaccuracies, I'm going to imagine that your business tolerates zero inaccuracies, right? And so, if that's correct, and your output can't have inaccuracies. I read an article that you put together about this data funnel and how you start organizing your information and your data and the needs to turn data into information and that information into knowledge and then that knowledge into wisdom, I think is if I'm quoting it correctly. Can you tell us what you mean by that and maybe expand on that a little bit more?
Sure, Clyde. And I'll start with my title as well. I'll tell you the two things I love about my title, right? It's the insights and analytics component because it's so relevant in today's day and age as we go into AI. One is that it says insights and analytics and not findings and analytics, because I think insights is a different piece than a finding, and it is very difficult to obtain, especially when you want to deliver business impact. So, I'm a big consumer of Sherlock Holmes mysteries, and to me, digging for insights is just like, a detective game. And the material we have, as you know, is just exploding, both in modality as well as in volume and in velocity. And so the fact that it contains insights is the first piece I really like. And the second is it says insights and analytics, because integration is becoming the word of the day, right? Is we, for a very long time, we were hitting 20% of information in a structured form. 80% of that information has no structure. Mm-hmm. And with AI in the mix, we are now able to actually attack that. It's still in nascent phase, but we're very optimistic that we will get our hands on that. And so the fact that it touches both insights and analytics, I think, reminds me every day there's a lot I have to learn in my business as we're transforming through the period we're going through, and in a few years we'll look very different, right? So coming back to I think what you talked about, and I'm really happy you started off with that, because I think people get too bogged down with data, and obviously data is important. If you don't have a good data product, you don't have good AI. But data is just data, right? And I grew up in undergraduate. One of my favorite courses in undergraduate was a course in art history, where I learned very early on that, looking at something is different from what you see in it. And to me, data is just something you look at, right? And if you want impact, you have to have the ability to tell people and to show people what's in it, right? And that's where the funnel begins, right? So data is a great starting point. But then there are several things that you need to pack beyond that, right? You need to, for example, curate data. Just because there's a lot of data doesn't mean it's useful. And even before you hit the data, you have to first make sure the question that you're asking is the right question, because otherwise you're going to try to solve a puzzle that is the wrong puzzle. And that's the most frustrating experience, as well, as I'm sure you lived through this experience, as a number of us have done. And then you've got to integrate information, because the what and the whys have to come together. You can't just deliver to the business what a situation looks like without telling them why it is so or what you need to do about it. You then need to be able to, storytell it in a format that somebody who doesn't want to deal with, complexity can understand an overarching narrative. And I think really now the order of the day is, how do you progress that line of thinking? Right, is you don't want to just have a fire and just put that fire out if there are the fire spreading in the forest, right? So you've got to learn to progress questioning as we're getting into a resource-constrained environment with overwhelming amounts of information. And unless all of those steps follow the data product, you just remain at data. Mm-hmm. And impact and value today go down to quality of the data and how you're able to convert it to information and to enterprise wisdom and knowledge, right? So that's why I talk about the funnel. I think it's a great analogy to start our conversation.
Yeah, your analogy made me think of, there's a quote from about 20 years ago: data is the new oil. And the metaphor is kind of useful because data, just like oil, until it's refined, it really doesn't have any use or meaning for you. You've got to refine it. You've got to, is it kerosene? Is it, petroleum? What are you doing with it? How are you refining it? And I thought it was a pretty good analogy because it fuels your environment, but raw data, just like raw oil, is sort of useless.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll add a piece to that is, given how much energy the LLMs are using now, it's even part of a sustainability conversation, right? So we're in the clean energy of data, if you will. So I like that analogy. Absolutely.
It's a good one. It's a good one. And, I know that we talked about data, and before we move on to AI, right, and scaling those use cases, data used to be about ingestion and storage, but you're really hitting on the fact that it's becoming more about provisioning and consumption, right? And driving further into those AI use cases. Can you comment just a little bit more on challenges that your organization faced as you're preparing to onboard this AI? You've got silos of data everywhere. You've got, and it comes in all sorts of different formats and modalities, as I think you might have noted. Just comments to the listeners in terms of how you prepared, how you got ready, or what methodologies or architectures you put together to at least organize your data. I used to say put a magnet over it, but that's the wrong thing to say with data. But how did you find true north with getting some of your data prepared?
And that's a great question, right? So I think a lot of people kind of dive into the AI ball game because you got to be in it to win it. But you first got to have the infrastructure and the environment that kind of delivers value in AI, right? So there are a few elements to that, right? I think the most important piece I would say is organizational readiness, right? Even before I go into data or technology stacks and things of that nature, you got to have an organization that's ready both bottom down, laterally, and upstairs, right? Which means you need a culture that is innovation driven, prudent risk taking. These are things that are supported. You need stakeholders who are ready to receive something different, receive information in a different modality or with diverse modalities that are very different from what we're used to. And you need people who are willing to learn something new, right? So that is a given, right? So I start there. And it's not something we all take for granted. it requires thinking, it requires an effort to kind of get the organization ready, right? So that's one piece. The second piece is the technical readiness, right? And that has many elements to it, right? And I think you've touched on a few of them. Infrastructure obviously is very big. You've got to have a cloud platform that is scalable. You've got to have some kind of data pipeline that is robust enough to be able to manage the load we are talking about with the enormity of information. You got to have unified data, because if you don't have that, you're not connecting the system. Your APIs have to be interoperable, because that's kind of where it becomes useful to the consumer. So there's that bit. Then you really want data that's ready for AI, right? And that speaks to the quality dimension that we've been talking about. You need a metadata that is rigorous, so you can govern that data appropriately by tracking lineage and things of that nature that are very important, right? These are all steps that are part, I believe, of the infrastructure that needs to be baked in, right? Which most organizations have really examined before they jump into AI, those that are AI forward. Then you want a modularity to that architecture, because I think ultimately things have to be scalable. And if they have to be scalable, you have to have an environment that encourages like transfer learning, exchange of things that are developed. So you don't want a one-time design that kind of restricts you in the application, because then you're just going to stay in the mode of pilot and never go to production, right? And there are not investments you can make that are so kind of honed into one application that they would justify the value. So there's that whole piece. And the last piece I want to talk to, which I think is increasingly becoming important, is this real world readiness and AI readiness. And this is, speaking to, you could have a great technical readiness for today, but are you ready for the rapid evolution that's happening every day, right? And an example of this, I just pulling one out of the hat, is everything now needs to be real time delivered, right? And we used to do, these retrieval augmentation, using classic vector RAGs, right? Now we use graph databases, which allow you to explore domains of knowledge and complexity in your data using nodes and edges, and it's a whole different representation of your data schema. But your system has to be ready to be able to accommodate that, right? And so there's that whole piece that has become critical for not only being ready today, but being ready to evolve with the rapid changes we're seeing in stacks and capabilities with AI. And then finally, you need process readiness, right? Nothing can be done unless there's an investment behind it, which means you have to be ready on day one to measure some form of ROI. I mean, ROI is a dangerous word with AI, because of, it's still innovation that I would say is early in the innovation cycle. It's not yet in steady state, especially like with deep learning and unstructured data and things like that. But that said, you still do need metrics of measurement in terms of, was your business more agile versus doing it traditionally? What is the value impact you were able to make in terms of getting to a decision? Was your insight actually deeper, and have you measured the impact that decision had that you got via AI? In terms of, how long it would have taken to get an insight that probably wasn't as deep using traditional methodologies. So I think you need that whole piece. And we've kind of been approaching it like many other companies in a very systematic way, because we want to be ready not only for, the short term, we want to be ready for the long haul, right? And we want an evolving mindset towards innovation with AI.
Arvind, let me thank you for joining me today. I feel like we could talk for another hour, but fascinating topics. I very much appreciate it. And for our listeners, for more interview information and insights, please visit cdomagazine.tech. Thank you.
Clyde, thank you very much. And again, thanks to CDO Magazine. I hope to see you in New York, where we will use guarded optimism to cross our streets. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Thank you.